We all know about games like Elden Ring, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Sekiro. We love these games and enjoy them and the challenges which they give us. But these games have got one common factor which is also a factor which makes Souls-like games stand out from the rest. That's right. I am talking about their difficulties, challenges, and toughness which can make any experienced gamer wanna break their controller. Especially the boss fights in these games. They can surprise the player in a lot of ways and can make players stuck in a particular segment for a week or maybe more than a week. Some bosses can seem very simple at first, but later the player finds out that the boss was fooling them because they found that boss had a secret phase or a special set of attacks, and thus player gets their ass whooped by the boss. Now you are probably thinking that why the bosses in these games are so tough. I mean, even linear games have bosses, but why is that only Souls-like games have the most toughest boss fights? Well, this is what I'm gonna explain in this video. So let's start now. Okay, so there are multiple reasons that why the boss fights in Soulsborne games are a lot tougher than that of other games. One of those reasons also includes psychology. FromSoft actually plays with your psychology as soon as you enter the boss arena, which already makes you anxious and you start panicking. You think that, oh shit, I'm not ready for this. And there's a very simple reason behind all this, and that is your own brain. Yeah, you heard me correct. Your own brain makes you decide that no matter what, you can't defeat the boss, because in normal linear games, there is a cinematic cutscene for the boss which shows us that how our boss looks like and what weapons he has got, which gives player the time to prepare. But in Soulsborne games, there is hardly ever a cutscene before a boss. They only have cinematic cutscenes before some main bosses, who play a big role in the story, and even in them we are not allowed to know more about them. Hence, it's a surprise for the player in most cases, and above all that, the epic boss music puts the player into thinking that they can never defeat the boss. Hence, they start to make moves in haste instead of properly planning their attacks. They start panicking and forget that something like parrying even exists. It can take more than 3 attempts for the player in order to get used to the boss arena's atmosphere, and about 5 to 6 attempts in order to get the rhythm of the pattern of attacks which boss is using. Even after recognizing the pattern, the player can still miscalculate because the boss's AI in Souls games are programmed differently than linear games, which we are gonna discuss further in the video. And of course, it works differently for different kind of players, depending on their experience and playing style. Some can figure out early, while some can take a while to figure out depending on their experience with games. And when player gets overwhelmed with the boss, then rage quit starts to interfere with their psychology, which makes things even worse for them. Hence, psychology is one of the reasons that why boss fights in Souls games are tougher than any type of game. Now of course that psychology is not the one and only reason for that. FromSoftware are more cunning than that. They have another card in their sleeve for us, and that is boss's AI, the pattern of attacks which the boss is programmed to follow. Now it is obvious that every video game have got this thing, but the way in which FromSoftware use this is very different from the others. Let's understand this with a little bit of visualization. Okay, so suppose that there is a boss A in a linear game who follows a certain pattern of attacks. Let's denote those attacks by P, Q, R and S. So boss A follows a finite number of attacks in a certain order. Let's make a set of those attack patterns. Set A dash is equals to P, R, Q, S. Set B is equals to R, Q, P, S. And set C is equals to S, Q, R, P. Now of course there are a lot of sets can be formed using the attack pattern of P, Q, R and S. But like I have said that bosses in linear games mostly aren't meant to be challenging as compared to Souls-like games. Their attack pattern can get predictable because linear games tend to focus more on their gameplay, story and characters more than bosses. Hence the pattern P, Q, R and S will follow 3 or 4 sets only. And the sequence will be something like this. We can make some union sets of A dash, set B and set C. A dash union B union C is equals to P Q R S, R Q P S, S Q R P. Set 1. Now set 2, P Q R S, S Q R P, R Q P S. Now set 3, S Q R P, R Q P S, P Q R S. Now set 4, R Q P S, P Q R S, S Q R P. Set 5, S Q R P, P Q R S, R Q P S. These are the approximate number of set of sequences of the attack patterns which the boss in a linear game may follow. Now developer can play with these sets. They can throw set 3 instead of set 1 and set 5 instead of 4. But since it's a linear game, then you can expect yourself to counter the boss. In some rare cases they can even meddle with the sets, like for example they can change the order of set 1 from A dash, B and C to C, B and A dash, and set 2 from A dash, C and B to B, C and A dash. But that is mostly predictable depending on the difficulty on which you are playing the game. And it also matters from person to person depending on their playing style. So I hope that the explanation is clear to you. Now it's obvious that this explanation is not absolute. It is just my attempt to explain that how the boss fights actually work. It's not perfect, I think. Anyways, let's talk about the bosses of Souls-like games. We are gonna keep the same way, just like we did with the linear games bosses. Let's assume the boss S here. Suppose that boss follows the pattern ABCD. Now let set P is equals to BACD, set Q is equals to ACBD, set R is equals to BCDA, set S dash is equals to DBCA, set T is equals to CBDA, set W is equals to BDAC, set U is equals to CADB, set V is equals to ACDB, and set Z is equals to DACB. Now there is a possibility that there can be more sets than these, but let's suppose them as the approximate number of sets. Now there is something which you all may have noticed, that like the last case, the sets here are really hard to memorize. Even after both bosses have got the same number of attack patterns, but they differ a lot when it comes to the number of sets. Now the union sets in Soulsborne's case will be impossible to mention in this video because a really huge number of sets can be formed from these. And this is exactly why Souls-like bosses are too tough to defeat. Because even they use a finite pattern of attacks, but the way in which they use that pattern makes it tough for the player to predict it. When the player expects set P, then they give them set T. When player expects set Q, then they give them set P. Just like this, they use their cunningness to deceive the player into believing that they are throwing an honest boss fight for them. And this is what makes these games unique and challenging from the rest. Do you have any ideas of your own regarding this? Feel free to express them in the comment section, and I will see y'all in the next video. Take care and bye bye.